Hello and welcome to Late Edition. I'm Sakal Bhatt. Well, India has staunchly indicated that reconfiguring of the Indus Waters Treaty for the sharing of 6 rivers with Pakistan is not off the table as a perfect response to the Uri terror attack after Prime Minister Modi said at a meeting, and I quote, "Blood and water cannot flow together," unquote. Prime Minister Modi held a high-level meeting to review the Indo-Pak Indus Water Treaty, and this high-level meeting was held in the wake, of course, of the sustained cross-border attacks, including Uri terror strike. India will exercise its rights under Indus Water Treaty to its fullest extent. And on the show tonight, we will discuss various ramifications of treaty when India says that it's going to keep all its options open vis-a-vis the treaty. The question on Late Edition tonight we ask is that how effective will this non-military option be in terms of containing neighbors or Pakistan's brazen ceasefire violations and terror strikes? And to discuss all of that, we're very glad to have on the show in Late Edition tonight Mr. T.C.A. Raghavan on my left, former Indian High Commissioner to Pakistan. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us on the show, and very glad to have also on the show Sushant, Sareen, strategic expert and senior fellow, Vivekanand International Foundation. Thank you, both of you. Sir, let me quickly start with you. Are we actually looking at this revisiting or re-looking at the Indus Water Treaty as an effective non-military option to counter the neighbor?
I believe what we are trying to signal to Pakistan that it's not acceptable that the pattern of behavior which it has exhibited over the past few years continue indefinitely. It is in that spirit that the Prime Minister had spoken recently about that if you want to compete in a healthy way. Let us try to see how do we overcome the challenge of poverty that we face. I think bringing the Indus Waters Treaty into the equation really is conveying that same sense of outrage which the Indian public feels, that the pattern of behavior which has existed in the past should not be allowed to continue. How effective it will be depends entirely on how the Pakistani government, the Pakistani people and Pakistan public opinion takes it. It is important to realize it's a nation of 200 million people, and there are certain steps which only they can take on their own. No external factor can take that decision for them. It is very much in their interest that they see the wisdom of having a better relationship with India, and are conveying this sense of outrage is therefore very important. I think it's important for your viewers to know that the Indus Waters Treaty was signed in 1962, and thereafter, despite many wars, periods of high tension, it has never seriously been brought into question. Doing so at this stage is conveying a message to Pakistan, and especially to the Pakistani government and to the people, that do recognize the results of your behavior and take corrective actions at this stage itself.
Sushant, your thoughts on it. What do you sense? What all does it really mean for the neighbor if India turns off the tap, or perhaps if India is thinking reconfiguring the rivers, as we put it?
No, I'll just take what Ambassador Raghavan has said a step forward. I think what India is indicating is that out of the basket of options which are available before us, there are some which are kinetic options, which are essentially military, both overt and covert options that can be exercised. And then there are the non-kinetic options which include diplomatic, economic and other such options. Indus Waters Treaty falls in the non-kinetic bit. The signaling is that the entire gamut of relations with Pakistan is now under review, and we are now going to see where all we can turn the screws on you to force a degree of compellence on you. I think that is the broad message. But what exactly we can do, how far we can go in terms of reviewing or abrogating or suspending the Indus Waters Treaty is another matter altogether. I think within the letter of the Indus Waters Treaty, there is plenty that we can do before we either suspend it or abrogate it. And the initial indications are that that is the direction in which the government is headed.
Which is?
Which is that in the first instance, there are within the Indus Waters Treaty, there are waters, for example, which are allotted to us on the western rivers, which have been otherwise allotted to Pakistan. We haven't made full use of those waters. So we create the infrastructure to utilize whatever water is already allotted to us under the treaty. That is point number one. Point number two is, for example, on drinking water and other things, we haven't used the Indus waters, and we are allowed use for drinking water and those kind of purposes. We are allowed the use of the western rivers. So let us utilize them for the benefit of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Number three, in terms of creating all the other power plants and others, hydropower plants, a lot of those projects are already on the anvil, but more are now going to be put in place, and the ones which are on the anvil are going to be expedited. So that is the thrust. On the eastern rivers, again, a lot of waters, and especially during the monsoon season, when there is an excess of water in the eastern river system, we tend to let the water flow into Pakistan. I think there is a very strong case to be made for utilizing that water within India. But the problem out there is interstate disputes within India between Punjab and Haryana, for example. So one of the purposes of the Satluj-Yamuna link canal was to divert some of the excess water and give it to Haryana. So we need to get our act also in order to make full use of it.
And that's what Prime Minister Modi, in so many words, has said, that we will now utilize our resources fully. A strong message coming from there as well. So what, if one has to put that statement in perspective, what is PM hinting at?
I think what the Prime Minister is saying, in a sense, is that you have to change your behavior with your neighbor. You cannot continue and expect that things will go on as usual. If terrorist attacks continue from Pakistan, no action is taken against those responsible for the attacks, and the groups which perpetuate such attacks have a wide ambit of operations and sanctuary in Pakistan itself. I think that is the central message which he is conveying. And certainly within the framework of the treaty, it is part of our national developmental goals that we try to enhance our hydropower potential in the eastern rivers, and certainly what is allowed within the ambit of the treaty, we should do so in the western rivers too.
PM also said that we'll expedite the dam process. Sources are telling us that this is also one of the postulates that emerged yesterday in the meeting. What does it mean?
No, it means that, we have a number of, number one, even if you want to stop the water flow, you want to turn the tap off, to use a very figurative kind of a term, where are you going to throw the water? How are you going to turn the tap off until and unless you have structures in place that you can divert the water somewhere or utilize it or impound it for some time? So I think some of the projects which are going to be built and which are likely to be built, even though they might conform to the letter of the treaty, but if push comes to shove, you can start utilizing that potential to actually regulate the flow of water into Pakistan, and this will actually start punishing Pakistan. The other point is that even when we utilize whatever waters are allotted to us within the treaty on the western rivers, we utilize all of that complement plus some more which we can by stretching the letter of the treaty a little bit more. What is important to understand is that Pakistan is increasingly becoming a very water distressed country. The per capita availability of water is falling, so every little bit of water is very important for them. So there is an element of pain which you inflict by developing this entire infrastructure. The second thing is, but what is important to understand is that this is not something which you can utilize overnight. It will take a few years before you have that infrastructure in place, that if you want to regulate, control the flow of water into Pakistan, you can do that. Otherwise, water by its very nature cannot be stopped. Correct. It has to flow somewhere. Yes. So I think we need to be very clear on that. It's not exactly a tap. So while we might use the analogy of turn off the tap, it isn't exactly a tap which we are going to turn off. So you need to build that infrastructure before you can actually utilize this. And if at that point of time, once you have that infrastructure in place, you decide that you are either going to suspend or abrogate the treaty, then of course there will be certain repercussions of that. But I don't think any treaty in the world is sacrosanct, number one. Number two, if you are willing to pay whatever other price which comes along with abrogation of the treaty, I don't see any reason why we can't do it. Other countries have done it. I'd see no reason why India can't do it. Of course, be ready that there will be a certain price attached to whatever decision you take.
All right, Ambassador Raghavan, they say that it's going to be a time-consuming process, obviously, quite understandably. Do we have time? That much of time?
Well,
because what in the wake of the recent developments, if you just even go back last 6 months.
I believe it is important that we understand in terms of first principles that whatever steps you take, at the end of those steps, you'll still be left with Pakistan as a neighbor. The idea is to try to alter Pakistan's behavior. And therefore, no matter how long it takes, no matter how much effort you put into it, we have to continue with that. Yes, it will be a long process. There is no simple silver bullet available which can change Pakistani behavior overnight. And I quite agree with my colleague that there are steps you have to take, there are infrastructures you do have to build up. It will be a time-consuming process, it will be a capital-consuming process, but a lot of it, as I said, is part of your own national developmental goals, and not all of it is directed against Pakistan per se. But the central point to remember is that what the government and the Prime Minister are doing just now is conveying one set of messages, and it's not correct to go beyond what is being conveyed, because you can open up a whole plethora of possibilities, but at this stage only one step has been taken, and the aim is to send a message to the Pakistani government and the people that please don't think that attacks can continue and other things will go on as if nothing has happened.
Sushant?
No, on this whole business of do we have the time, that it's a time-consuming process. See, my point is that for almost 35 years now, Pakistan has been imposing terrorism on us. It started in Punjab, and I'm not even going to the sordid history of the previous 35 years when they were sponsoring trouble in the northeast and other things. But let's just come down to what's been happening in Punjab and Jammu and Kashmir. 35 years they've been doing this, right? What has been our response?
But this, remember, treaty has survived two wars and up and out of frosty
forget the treaty. Forget the treaty.
Yeah,
let's talk about how, for example, supposing I want to, launch a kinetic operation against Pakistan. I need to have proper preparation. Now, the point is I can't do that if I'm not properly prepared, because there is going to be a fallout. My question is that for 35 years when we've been facing this, let us firm our resolve and say, okay, fine, it'll take us another 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. We will put in place all the measures which we need in place so that whenever this kind of a thing happens, there will be a very, very heavy price which will be extracted from the Pakistanis. Our problem is when an incident happens, we suddenly get all excited about it. There's a lot of outrage, and then we go back to sleep, which means that whatever time. So let me give you an example. If 2 years back when this government came into power, had it started putting in place all those measures and all those structures which were required, because I'm sure they knew that the nature of the Pakistani beast is not going to change, right? Had they put in place those structures today, perhaps we might not have been discussing this, we might have been discussing what had been done. So let us, if required, let us take the 3 years, 5 years, whatever number of years is required. But let us put in place all those measures, because look, I have been dealing with Pakistan for the last 20-25 years now, right? And this is one thing which I've been hearing from day one when I started dealing with Pakistan. We don't have the wherewithal to do something effectively. You mean to tell me that a country which at least pretends to be an emerging superpower, okay, or even a regional power, in 25 years hasn't been able to develop the kind of offensive measures to deal with a failing state like Pakistan? How scandalous is that? So I think we need to get out of this mode of not doing anything or expressing outrage in an episodic manner and then going back to sleep, which is what our national character is. It's about time we change that.
All right, it's about time we change that. Here we are talking about India, talking about re-looking at Indus Water Treaty vis-a-vis the recent terror attacks propagated by the neighbor Pakistan and the ramifications of it, and how is all that going to have an impact on the diplomatic ties with the neighbor. We're going to talk about that and much more after this short break. You're watching Late Edition. Stay tuned.
I really like cars. So just 2 weeks into the job, they gave me a company car. A big company car. It's got 14 wheels and quite the ground clearance. It can go pretty much anywhere, but it's not the easiest thing to park. The acceleration is decent. The handling is shaky. The engine noise is deafening. AC? Well, you can't have everything. But you know what? I love the gun.
We are India's most exciting workplace, and we are making you an offer. The Indian Army. Live a life less ordinary.
नहीं पानी तो पिला दो 6 महीने तो होने दे दूध पिए दादी दादा पानी दे दो
अभी कुछ नहीं
उसमें क्यों नहीं
क्योंकि 6 महीने से पहले कुछ और खिलाया पिलाया तो हो जाएगा दस्त
6 महीने तक सिर्फ मम्मी का ही दूध समझी
अरे वाह
इन दिनों अपडेटेड रेज्यूमे रखना बेहद जरूरी है। यस माइन प्रफुल्ल कुमार, मेजर प्रफुल्ल कुमार, पैरा स्पेशल फोर्सेस, 3 साल हॉस्टाइल जोन में टफ था। JNK में स्पेशल सर्विस, कुछ नए दोस्त बनाए, कॉम्बैट फ्री फॉल स्पेशलिस्ट, बलिदान के लिए तैयार। जैसा आप देख सकते हैं, आई वेयर माई हार्ट ऑन माई स्लीव एंड माई रेज्यूमे ऑन माई यूनिफॉर्म। विच अदर कंपनी लेट्स यू डू दैट?
हम हैं भारत के सबसे एक्साइटिंग वर्कप्लेस और हम दे रहे हैं आपको एक ऑफर। भारतीय सेना, आम नहीं ये जिंदगी।
वाओ, नया नेकलेस कितने का लिया?
ये तो मैंने पुराने नेकलेस को चेंज करके लिया।
पर पुरानी गोल्ड में तो बहुत पैसे काट लेते हैं ना ज्वेलर।
अगर ज्वेलरी हॉलमार्क हो तो ऐसा नहीं होता।
हॉलमार्क?
ये है हॉलमार्क का निशान, यानी ब्यूरो ऑफ इंडियन स्टैंडर्ड्स द्वारा सोने की गुणवत्ता की कड़ी जांच के बाद ये निशान दिया जाता है। हॉलमार्क यानी शुद्ध सोना।
हॉलमार्क यानी खरा सोना। गहने खरीदते समय हॉलमार्क का निशान अवश्य देखें।
Welcome back to a late edition. Let's continue our discussion. Ambassador Raghavan, let's for a layman to really understand this. The high points of this Indus Water Treaty, which was signed way back in 1960, I'm sure there's a lot of historical perspective to it because they say that it has survived 2 wars, but the neighbors have been very amicable with each other as far as the water sharing is concerned. But if I have to put it this way, a lot of water has passed in the bridge, even if you just look back 2 years. The way we have been so friendly with the neighbor, but what all we got in return, well, that's a different argument altogether. But whatever changes, relook, scrapping or keeping all options are open, all that is concerned, what are the high points in this treaty, if altered or when altered or changed, the changes or the implications it can have? See, on both sides.
The treaty was an act of great upper riparian generosity on the part of India. The rivers begin in India and they flow from India into Pakistan. Before partition, there was a common system of irrigation canals, both for East Punjab and West Punjab. Because partition was through the middle of the Punjab, that irrigation system got disrupted, and therefore the question was, how are the waters of these rivers to be shared? And after 10 years of negotiations carried out through the World Bank, and in which the World Bank was very strongly involved, the Indus Waters Treaty was signed. And in brief, the Indus Waters Treaty is that the eastern rivers, the ones which come into India, those will remain the exclusive preserve of India, while the rivers which flow from India into Pakistan, the western rivers, those will be for Pakistan's use, except that India would be allowed what is called non-consumptive use. That means you can build more hydroelectric, you can use it for hydroelectric projects, but you cannot stop the flow of water. You can use the water, but let it then thereafter flow uninterrupted to Pakistan. As I said, it was an act of great upper riparian generosity. At that time, there was a great deal of hope attached to the treaty because it was the first major intergovernmental agreement between India and Pakistan, or at least one of the first major intergovernmental agreements. Unfortunately, and this is really brings us up to the situation today, the government of Pakistan, and to a great extent public opinion in Pakistan, has not seen what a big step forward India had taken then by signing the treaty. But I really want to go back to the point Sushant had raised about, if you look at a wider time span, 20 years, 25 years, Pakistan behavior has continued unaltered. And certainly while it's a lot of that behavior has been directed against us and we have suffered some amount of damage, but really the point is to see what has happened to Pakistan in those last 20, 25 years. In 1990, most indicators of Pakistan and India would show the two countries more or less at par. And if you look at the situation today, India is here while Pakistan would be way down there. And this is entirely because of wrong policies, especially with regard to terrorist group security policies, which their government and their state has followed. And as I said, really the question is whether the people of Pakistan, whether its government, whether the right-thinking people over there will realize as to how disastrous these policies are for they themselves.
Their own house is in disarray, Sushant, that if this happens, whatever strong message that's coming, the underlying message of Prime Minister's statement as far as Indus Water Treaty is concerned, internal pressure on the Pakistani dispensation, because it's their people who are going to suffer. Water crisis is what they will be looking at.
Yeah, let me just come back to a point which Ambassador Raghavan made. What he calls an act of great upper riparian generosity. I would call it an act of folly, number one.
At that time?
Yes, and I'll explain why. And I would also say a sort of a naive kind of an approach towards Pakistan, not understanding what the monster called Pakistan is all about. And I'll give you the reason why.
Then, in 60s.
Yes. Because when Ambassador Raghavan talks about the canal system, which, and that got disrupted, one of the reasons why the Pakistanis were getting so agitated about Kashmir was that, in the public, perception in Pakistan, that all the waters flow from Kashmir, so they must have Kashmir under control. So I would imagine that one of the things was that it also reassures the Pakistanis that, look, water flows will not be stopped. That has not changed the Pakistani behavior, right? So, and despite the fact, I would imagine that we made a mistake because we allocated them a lot much.
Can we rectify it now in the current polity?
I don't know. See, that's the call which will have to be made at the political level, that whether you can do it, how much you can do it, and whether you can actually go in for, say, an Indus Waters Treaty 2, which is a lot more equitable than what Indus Waters Treaty 1 was. But one more point, that a lot of waters in the Indus River system comes from the river Kabul in Afghanistan. So at the time when we are building up our relations with Afghanistan, and that's not governed by any treaty, perhaps there's also a case to put a squeeze on the Pakistanis and at the same time develop the Afghan economy and make it more self-sustaining. Maybe there's a case for getting into building a large hydro power plant on the river Kabul, which will not only stop the water flowing into Pakistan, but will also put Afghanistan on a more self-sustaining path. I think that would be another measure which the government needs to start considering
Especially
seriously.
when Afghanistan is backing India on its war against on Pakistan. So, final comments from both of you. Sushant, first you, then I'll come to Sir. Quickly, scrapping it is one of the options, but India has said that all options are open.
Yeah, it is an option, but I don't think it's going to be exercised just yet. I think what is happening is a complete review of the entire gamut of relations, seeing where you can put the squeeze, and doing that in a calibrated manner. I think that seems to be the way the government is approaching this.
All right, Sir.
Well, I would say all these steps are possible, all these options are available, but at the end of them, we will still have a nuclear armed neighbor sitting next to us, which we'll have to deal with. Just like France cannot insulate itself from what is happening in Libya.
Haven't we made a very strong beginning here?
I think we've made a very good beginning.
Non-military front,
I think we've made a very good beginning, and I believe the Prime Minister and both the External Affairs Minister struck the right note that Pakistan has to see the damage it is doing to itself and the damage it will continue to do it to itself if it follows these policies.
Yes.
See, physical geography is unalterable. Political geography can be altered. So I suppose that is another option which we need to start looking at.
As reiterated by Prime Minister, blood and water cannot flow together. Thank you very much, Ambassador Raghavan, for joining us on the show. And Sushant, Sareen, thanks pretty much for being with us on Late Edition. With that, we quickly need to wrap up. Meanwhile, news and updates continue on the national news channel DD News. Namaskar.